All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sprint 14 review. This is the first of 4 back-to-back sprints for the spring-summer work cycle. The sprint ran from June the 22nd through July the 6th. And before I turn it over to our awesome tech lead, I just wanted to mention that we have a new developer who's joined us from UCSD. That's Christian DeCastro, and I don't think Christian is with us at this moment, but I just want to say welcome to the team, Christian. So Tansen, just get us started. He's out sick today. Thank you, Jessica. Hope you feel better, Christian.
Everybody's a little under the weather. I'm feeling a little under the weather myself.
Oh no.
The baby brought something back from daycare.
Okay. Well, I hope you all just hang in there.
I want to start by just calling attention to the sort of overarching theme that we've set for this work cycle, which is to be able to support a real full deposit lifecycle for an object. So what that looks like is uploading content both individually and in batch, editing and adding descriptive metadata or other user-defined metadata for existing objects, running the workflow and event-triggered work like characterization and access derivatives, assigning permanent identifiers. Primarily, we're interested in the short term in arcs as the canonical IDs internally in the system. And then last but definitely not least is publishing that content to a public access platform. All of these things represent work that we've touched in some way or another in the past. So a large part of what we're hoping to accomplish this sprint is to really, this work cycle is to really make those things all fit together into a cohesive process for objects. So with that said, I want to start by talking a little bit about the work that we did this sprint. So I think what I'll do is start with the things that we can concretely demo and then talk a little bit about the stuff that's a little less concrete. So first, we did some work to improve the batch update or the batch upload process. So I'm just going to go ahead and demo that. So I've got oh my goodness. Let's just see if I can figure out. There we go. Okay. So I've got a demo CSV that I'm going to upload. The process that we have for adding content looks like that content has to be in a staging area. So there's file names in the CSV that associate with objects. And the process that we've outlined so far is like a user is going to put the content on a drive somewhere. And that's going to result in it being in a staging area. And then the user will be able to search for their file, the directory that contains the files that match this batch. I only have one folder in this. So like if I do random nonsense, then I don't find anything. So I really, the way it's set up now, I really do sort of need to know what folder it is to have it work. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and upload. And that's gone ahead and created these two objects, which match the two in the CSV. Notably, there's more than 2 files associated with this. So I think we got demo.jpg here. Oh, well, maybe there's not more than 2 files. Maybe I'm misremembering what this demo should look like. But if I go it should be able to download this image. Let's see if it opens. There, it's all got a little puppies. So there you go. That's a batch upload. Each line of metadata in the CSV corresponds to an object. So we got really basic stuff here, title. Notably, these objects have gone into the workflow, the default workflow. So they've gone in the deposited state. And I should have got some notifications about that. Yeah, and you can see I've been doing, it looks like I got stale notifications. Curious. Okay. The other piece that we've worked on here is that I can do a file first upload. And I think this one we'll see more than 2 files load up, because there's some files that don't match the objects in this drive. That's what I was thinking of. So if I want to do a file first upload, and the thinking here is like, I don't have any metadata yet, but I do have a big folder of files and I want to work it into the workflow, then I'm going to do submit. And that has made some files that match the file, or some objects that match the file names, and then I should be able to like does that actually work? Yeah, it sure does. Okay, so that's the work that we did on batch, was to take honestly some prior work that we'd done a few work cycles ago and make it really end-to-end demoable. The other thing that I want to demo is that I can delete these objects. This is work that we picked out as low-hanging fruit. So that will go ahead and delete the object, and we should see that it's not there anymore. I can also do this in little groups. So I decided that these ones are not appropriate, like these crept into the batch incorrectly. I'll go ahead and remove them. This is a real like object purge, and apart from audit trail type data, this doesn't leave any trace of this object behind. So that's some things destroyed. Apart from that, we did some work on bug fixes to sort of catch us up to the very active, gratefully very active upstream work that's happening in the Samvera space. So we've been keeping Comet tracking the latest of the Hyrax work upstream of it, and that's made it easier for us to do our work in a way that leaves us with less technical debt in the long term. So there were a few things that crept into that process off work cycle that created bugs on our side, and mainly like we were having a problem specifically with the new object process, where if I do this, if I like add a file here, then this was crashing instead of finishing the upload. I'm going to stop playing with random things. Okay, so then anyway, we fixed a bug related to that file upload, and 1 or 2 other little upgrade tickets got checked off. We also did some work on that end-to-end publish process. So some work on the metadata API that supports that process got done, and probably most notably, some work that we can't quite demo yet, but that I think will be absolutely ready for the next one of these sprint reviews is the real deal metadata configuration. So we'll be able to have a static file that represents the UCSB metadata and the UCSD metadata, and be able to deploy those two things as the metadata profile. So you can see right now we're still sort of operating on this absolutely minimal metadata field, and maybe this is actually looking pretty good, isn't it? Anyway, the absolutely minimal metadata is here, but the idea is that there will be static files that are maintained by the metadata specialists at either campus, and those will deploy as the metadata profiles for each campus's version of the application. That's, I think, maybe minutes from being real, but neither campus really has the metadata profile files ready to deploy that way just yet. And I say that though I fear that it will make the metadata specialists on either side mad at me, because I think there's like a pretty real UCSD one floating around somewhere, and some stuff for UCSB as well. Okay, so we did all those things. Oh, the other thing that got worked on a bit this sprint is the background derivatives process, but that's also not yet in a place where we can demo. So I'm hoping that 2 weeks out, we'll be able to do a process where if I say add like a PDF. I'm not going to actually do it, I guess, because I don't have a PDF in the fixtures here. But suppose I added a PDF here where we'd be able to do my manuscript. We'd be able to do, oh, cute. That's great. I love that. We'll work on that. We'll not put English in, and that should deal with that problem for now. That's doing a good job of validating something that we're not enforcing on the form side. That's what just happened there. Okay, so what I'm hoping is that we'll generate thumbnails and OCR and so on for the objects that are uploaded, the files that are uploaded by this time next sprint. Yeah, I think that, oh, the one last thing is that we did a bunch of backend work and documentation on the access control features. So the most notable way that manifests for users right now is this visibility setup here. So you can see there's like three set visibilities, and then there's the embargo feature, which like the embargo and lease make it possible for you to set a visibility now and then have it change at some future date. And what powers these behind the scenes is a whole data model that supports access control lists. So public visibility means that a group called public can see this object. And our hope is that those access control list data model will power permissions throughout each campus's digital library. So the ground truth for who has access to this object will be represented in that model. And I think that this still is an open ticket for next time. Oh no, that totally worked. Great. I love that. That's an open ticket for next time that we're about to close. So if I make this object public, you can see that it goes public. And what that means is that an access control got set somewhere behind the scenes that says that the public in general can view this object. And while our intent is that the public won't view it here on the Comet UI, that in order for it to be visible to users in, say, Tidewater or sorry, I'll try and not use code names. In order to be visible to harvesters in the OAI endpoint, or to be visible to users in the geodata platform or other discovery platforms, the correct permissions need to be in place. And what that means in practice also is that if I come back here and I mark this private, that I should have the expectation that it is no longer visible to users out there in the world. So we did some documentation for the ground model for that, targeted at technical users, and that's going to make it possible for us to keep the model organized, which is, as you might imagine, really important. You know, like if you the end user want an object to be private, we, the technical team, really want to be able to guarantee that it's private. So that's some work that we did this sprint as well.
And so can I interrupt you real quick?
Of course, always.
So in this example here, when you made it public, can something that's in review stop something from going public?
Yeah, so
should it, in other words?
That's right. And I think that I'd love to talk to you about the specific workflow processes that we have in mind. So I think there's really two separate flows here, that sometimes the second one will reach into the first. So the first is, if I make an object public, that means that I set that access control data such that the public can read it. So if somebody comes along, somebody being a discovery platform, comes along asking the metadata API, can I show this object to the public? That API is going to answer, yes, you can. However, the process of actually publishing the object is a separate one that's powered in part by this workflow. So if this object is in review, it will normally be the case that I haven't published it to any place. And I think we'll demo more on the publishing process next time round as well. But the short answer is that if I haven't actually given this object to a discovery front end to display, then that query, can I send it to the public, will never happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It's also the case, I said that this workflow will sometimes reach into the ACLs. It's also the case that workflow state transition, so moving something from review to published or review to whatever the end workflow state is, can, in principle, alter as part of that transition, it can alter the ACLs. So that's a feature where, like, if a workflow is defined in a way that at the end of it, everything should be published in geodata, then we want to be able to see, okay, at the end of this process, these objects have permissions such that logged in geodata users can see them. or like that's the minimum permission that we should be allowing on those objects. Does that make sense? So the review workflow or the workflow process in general can impact the ACLs. The opposite should never be true.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's the sprint review that I had planned for you. Does anybody have anything that they want to say? Gabriella, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, I know we didn't talk about this earlier, but did you want to maybe mention a couple of goals that we have set for the next sprint? The one that started today.
The next sprint is starting today, and I'm gonna, on a separate screen, I'm gonna pull up the sprint board so that I can do a quick little reference. That's always a good thing to be doing. So some work that we have in for the next sprint is, well, we have this first of all, which I think we'll do some review and QA on and maybe close out as is. I'm not surprised totally that this is fixed now. I think that's probably an upstream fix that came down for us. But we had marked this as work that needed to be done, this switching an object to public. We also have work that's related to this workflow process in mind. Namely, there's a point in that process for a given workflow, and the workflows, I'll remind, are highly configurable. So during that process, somewhere before the end state in a typical workflow, we want to define a canonical arc representing these objects. So that's work that we want to get in. We've done some prior work to do the actual EasyID integration that makes the arc, that makes it possible for this system to programmatically assign arcs, but we hadn't at that time decided how we would trigger that process. And we now feel like that's a configurable workflow feature. So we're moving forward with that implementation. We're also planning to do another round of sort of heavy duty documentation where we did the ACLs last time. We're planning to do both dev facing and user facing documentation for the workflow processes and roles. And I imagine that we'll do a little technical work on the workflows in general apart from that, or as falling out from that documentation work. There's honestly, actually, maybe I should demo this. Okay, that's not what I wanted to demo. Maybe I should demo things that I actually need to demo. So, so we did have at some point a sort of bug with collections where we had one collection page that worked totally great and one collection page that doesn't, and crashes. So this is, now we've sort of redirected this collection page to the one that works and avoided having two separate collection implementations, which felt like a lot of extra work for no reason. So that's also work that we did this sprint, though it's pretty like a one-line change to make this happen. And we're doing more creature comfort and ironing out the wrinkles on the collections process as well. So in particular, supporting nested collections really well, making it possible to see the objects. So you can see up here, it says total items 1, but how many objects does it think it has? So we're fixing little things like that. And in general, really focusing in on that end-to-end publishing process. So we've got a ticketed sprint for the actual, we've got a ticketed sprint for the publish, and we've got a ticketed sprint for the remove from a published endpoint. And those, that I think the big thing that I'd love to have us demoing next sprint is I've created an object, I've moved it through the workflow, and I can see it in a front end. Likely that front end is the OAI endpoint this next work cycle, but we also have tickets in sprint to do some engagement on Shoreline in particular, and there were some Comet level tickets that were opened by the Shoreline team that we're including in sprint, and we're also including some discussion of the Shoreline object and structure requirements so that we can close out the work cycle, not the sprint, but the work cycle by demoing end-to-end publishing for objects into Shoreline. So the real dream for the work cycle is I've got a batch process that corresponds to a workflow for geodata, and that team can actually create objects, edit them, QA them, move them into production for discovery and Shoreline, all through the Comet UI. That's the big prize.
All right, so I think that summarizes what's been happening and what's going to continue to happen, and just want to recognize everybody for awesome work as usual. We started off with a bang, and no pun intended with 4th of July happening, Jessica, but we will continue.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out, Gabriella. The team was really productive this past 2 weeks, which is really great. Really great, especially on a first sprint back with lots of holiday and illness distractions besides. Really got a ton done under circumstances where a lot less might have been reasonable.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.